It was once a vibrant rebel in the media. Vice was edgy. It challenged the system and it was growing exponentially, eventually becoming the juggernaut of the digital era. At one point, Vice's evaluation was $5.7 billion. And there was a brief period where I called Vice my home. I was the founding member of Vice News. They had many personalities there who worked on documentaries. But in terms of doing on-the-ground field reporting and live reporting, my understanding is that I was the first. Vice News didn't exist when I joined. It was just kind of a tag for some content they would put up if it was news related. And then I started doing dispatches and live streams. And then they launched Vice News, and it became the fastest growing news organization ever. At least that's what they said. Could just be marketing. I don't know. Well, now, my friends, it appears Vice Media may finally be done. Oh, I know. I'm hearing everybody say, what do you mean they're already done? Okay, hold your horses. It is now a withering husk of the skin suit that it became after it was gutted and destroyed by corporate interests and the woke. When Vice first started, it was extremely edgy and punk rock, and they did a lot of shocking and offensive things. Rather interestingly, it went from this punk rock zine to a corporation. And all of a sudden, they had to consider what it meant to be acceptably edgy. Now, in the early days, it meant writing fake articles. At least they've been accused of doing that. It meant putting really nasty things in jars and effectively hazing interns. I don't know if any of those things are true. I never experienced them. But that's just the legends that they say about how Vice used to be. What I can say is that in my experience, there were many people who worked there who seem to have been friends, insiders. Many people who, at the time when I started, they were the people that Vice could get. You know, when Vice needed someone to do a certain job, they couldn't afford the six-figure New York executive, so they get one of their buddies to do it. Eventually, they went corporate and those people got fired and they were gone. And around the time I was joining, a lot of people were pointing out that the company was starting to move in a corporate direction. But even if that was the case, there was still this belief that this would be the anti-establishment rebel in the media. I remember Shane Smith giving an interview, I think it was on Colbert, where he was like, we're not Democrat, we're not Republican, we don't want to play that. And I was inspired by that. That's why I wanted to join the company. I was like, these are people who get it, right? It's interesting. Well, now we're hearing that Vice may merge with another company in order to go public, present a public offering. The reason why I say that this is the end, Vice at one point, I was watching this happen when I was there. It was becoming more and more corporate, but eventually, after I left, it started becoming woke. There's a lot of reasons for this. Some people I know who worked there said it was because there were too many scandals plaguing the executives and that these new investors came in and said, listen, we're going to keep getting slammed as misogynists unless we go full on feminist, intersectional, woke, etc. Plus, they said, think about what young people want. That's what I was told. Don't know if it's true. Again, I just know people who work there, and this is what I was told. I left Vice for another company, and I heard similar things. Around this time, we did start to see Vice become an establishment woke mouthpiece. When I left Vice, I went to work for ABC. When I left them, I went to go report in Sweden on some claims that were made by Donald Trump. I had people from Vice messaging me saying, don't go and report there. And I was just so confused. Why are my colleagues, former, from Vice, who used to go on the ground with me, now telling me not to do this? That's weird. What happened to this company in the 2 years I've been gone? Well, my friends, it was gutted and it became a skin suit. That's what happens. It's happening to the New York Times right now. The parasitic leech of, wokeness enters in at the base of the spine and starts consuming everything until all that's left is a skin suit they wear, flopping around like the dude in Men in Black. The guy, the bug puts on the skin suit and he's like, oh, got sugar water. That's basically what Vice became. At one point, it was just punk rock, edgy, sex, drugs, and rock and roll. It was absurd. It was exciting. It inspired people. With Vice now looking at this merger, as well as layoffs, seems to me that this would be the true end of Vice, merging with another company in order to go public. It's a SPAC, a special, it's an acquisitions company or something like that. It's like a shell company. I will go through what this means. But it's basically like, to me, it looks like this is officially the end. Now, there will be a withered husk of a skin suit that is named Vice. But will it actually be anything close to it? Look, man, The New York Times right now is still the New York Times. You know what I mean? Like, we know that the CRT people are gutting it and wearing the New York Times like a skin suit, and it's creepy. And that's why you see people like Barry Weiss resign. But we still can see the brand and the paper that is the New York Times. We're just upset that it got, effectively taken over by cultists. With this merger, they're effectively just going to mash it into, a bowl with a bunch of other old skin suits and then try and make some money off of it. To me, that's really going to be the end. You can call it Vice, but it's not even a skin suit at that point. Well, let's start light. Vice Media just laid off a handful of digital staffers. Surprise, surprise, the Trump slump is here. I don't even know if Vice has been relevant for years. Of course, they did the Charlottesville thing 4 years ago, 3.5 years ago. That gave them a lot of prominence and relevance. And now they're on Showtime. But does anybody really talk about them all that much anymore? There was a period where every single meeting I went to, someone said, we want to be Vice. And they would always say Vice, but. They would say, we want to be Vice, but nice. We want to be Vice, but for families. We want to be Vice, but, more advertiser friendly. I heard it so often. They called it Nice Vice. Can we make this authentic, on the ground experience where people are learning the news from one of their buddies? And I warned them all. I said, you realize that's what YouTube is. It's the authentic experience, so they say. You're hanging out with your friends. You're sitting down having a conversation. And so there's a bunch of different ways you can do it. With Vice, they were just some regular dudes who went to North Korea, who went to, Iran. Pretty sure they went to Iran. And you have this guy just being like, this is crazy. Here's what I'm experiencing. And it felt authentic. Everybody wanted to have that. Now they got it. But at a certain point, when Vice becomes extremely corporate, then woke, and then a withered husk being passed off to a merger, things come to an end, you know what I mean? And I feel kind of bad because there's probably someone who's, 20 years old right now. Think about this, 20 years old. And it was almost 8 years ago that I joined Vice. What I saw in this company that was inspiring and challenging the system, they never knew it existed. So now they enter this world with Vice just being another one of these garbage media companies. Here's what's happening. Maybe I'm getting a little personal and a little philosophical. Without Vice, it's the end of an era. I mean, there were a lot of companies that started up, Mike.com, Huffington Post, BuzzFeed. Vice had been around for a long time, and they were something different. Now, we can talk about BuzzFeed. They're rather successful. They just bought Huffington Post. And sure, they also sell cookware in Walmart, if you didn't know that. But Vice was the juggernaut. This is truly an end of an era. Well, here's the story from Insider. It's as cut and dry as you can see it is. They say Vice Media laid off a handful of top staffers in its digital unit on Thursday, said 3 people with direct knowledge of the matter. Vice sources described the move as a restructuring rather than cost-cutting exercise, but they always do that. You mean to tell me that while we're in the Trump slump, you can't milk the orange man narrative? Your layoffs are for restructuring? Spare me the lies. Or what I assume to be lies. Let's avoid litigation. At a meeting on Thursday, employees were told the cuts would remove management layers and that the people laid off would not be replaced in those roles, said one staffer who was present. We are constantly evaluating our business, blah, blah, blah. You get it. Yeah. I remember when they merged all their different verticals back under Vice. Motherboard used to be its own site. A bunch of other, Vice used to have a bunch of different sites and they brought them all together. Why? Consolidation as the media ecosystem began collapsing. And Shane Smith called it out. I mean, he was the CEO. He said in 2014, there'd be a bloodbath. I believe it was 2014. Trump staved that off. Well, here we go, baby. From the Wrap. Vice Media in advanced talks to merge with SPAC and go public. The digital media outlet has discussed going public with several SPACs recently, including one led by former Disney executives Kevin Mayer and Tom Staggs. Let's break down what the story, and then we'll go over what a SPAC is. Vice Media is in advanced talks to go public following a merger with 7GC & Co. Holdings, a special purpose acquisition company, according to a report from The Information on Wednesday. The story comes after Vice was talking to at least 2 SPACs earlier this month about going public, with one of the offers at about $2.5 billion, or about 56% less than Vice's peak evaluation of $5.7 billion in 2017. You know, it's funny. Disney wrote down their investment in Vice to zero. To zero. That's amazing. They basically said, we've lost all this money. 7GC & Co. founding partner Jack Leaney and Vice Media did not immediately respond to a request for comment. Vice had previously discussed merging with other SPACs, the information reported on Wednesday, including one led by Group 9 Media and another led by former Disney executives Kevin Mayer and Tom Staggs. Mayer and Staggs are running two SPACs together, Forest Road Acquisition Corp. Their latest tech and media-focused SPAC raised $350 million earlier this month. They say 7GC & Co. raised $230 million when its SPAC debuted in late 2020. Its share price was up 2%. Back in 2017, Vice secured a $450 million investment from private equity firm TPG, valuing the company at $5.7 billion. But it has struggled to turn a profit, like many other digital media companies in recent years. The Wall Street Journal reporting the outlet lost $50 million in 2019. If a deal is reached soon, it's expected to fall well short of Vice's previous valuation. Vice isn't the only media firm looking to go public via a SPAC deal either. BuzzFeed is also discussing a deal with 890 Fifth Avenue Partners, priced a little below BuzzFeed's peak evaluation of $1.7 billion, the information reported. Now listen, I mean, that's good news, I suppose, for a lot of these digital outlets. They're looking for an exit, they're looking for a merger, and they're going to make some money. I'm just saying it comes to this point where they do these mergers. Once Vice officially merges with somebody else, ain't no Vice no more. Vice is the top of the hill where they are. Now they'll just become under the crown of some other company. Let me tell you what a SPAC is real quick. This is from CNBC. A special purpose acquisitions company is essentially a shell company set up by investors with the sole purpose of raising money through an IPO to eventually acquire another company. For instance, Diamond Eagle Acquisition Corp was set up in 2019 and went public as a SPAC that December. It then announced a merger with DraftKings and gambling tech platform SBT Tech. DraftKings began trading as a public company when the deal closed in April. So a SPAC has no commercial operations, makes no product, sells nothing. In fact, their only asset is typically the money raised in its own IPO. Usually a SPAC is created or sponsored by a team of institutional investors, Wall Street professionals from the world of private equity or hedge funds, while even high-profile CEOs like Richard Branson and Tillman Fertitta have jumped on the trend and formed their own SPACs. That's because when a SPAC raises money, the people buying into the IPO do not know what the eventual acquisition target company will be. Institutional investors with track records of success can more easily convince people to invest in the unknown. That's also why a SPAC is also called a blank check company. Once the IPO raises capital, SPAC IPOs are usually priced at $10 a share. That money goes into an interest-bearing trust account until the SPAC's founders or management team finds a private company looking to go public through an acquisition. So what they're trying to say, or at least what it sounds like, is I don't know if what they're basically saying that Vice will go public and then be bought out. Is that the plan? Maybe there was never any real end goal for Vice. But it's you know what, man? It's the end of an era. And maybe a lot of people, maybe most of you watching don't care all that much about Vice. It's sad, isn't it? I remember watching that video. Ryan Duffy, bulletproof clothing. Wasn't that fun? The biggest ass in Brazil. Wasn't that fun? They used to do a lot of fun and interesting shows. It was like Vice was showing you this side of the world of interesting, weird, and wild things that existed right before us that we didn't see, that we didn't know about, because the media didn't care to tell us about it. And then all of a sudden we had this very interesting show. Now, I do think a lot of what Vice's successes was built upon YouTube and Google. You see, when Vice first started making these documentaries, YouTube needed to compete with the likes of Netflix and other digital, rising digital operations. So all of a sudden, Vice documentaries are featured. Look, you had people on YouTube that were doing stuff like this, and YouTube was like, that's not strong enough to beat Netflix now. Don't get me wrong. They've quickly realized the authentic conversation and podcast is one of their biggest opportunities. YouTube is the biggest podcast platform. That's my understanding. So Vice started making these documentaries. YouTube said, this is what we want people to watch because they're fun, exciting, interesting, and it's going to make people want to be on YouTube. This made Vice huge. It gave them a massive digital platform, and they rolled with it. And I was excited to watch these things. I had such fun. I remember 2012, I'm like sitting in, my apartment, and we're watching these Vice docs. I'm like, this is so cool, dude. I want to do this stuff. I want to go on these adventures. I want to go, crawl through the underground of Las Vegas and see like the mole people or whatever they call them. And they used to do that, and then they stopped, and it became so boring. It's one of the reasons I left. I mean, when I was there, I went to Ukraine during the conflict, and we did that on the ground. Here's what's happening. Here's what we're seeing. I went to Venezuela. I had to flee the country. I went to Thailand. These things were so exciting and so much fun. And then it just started becoming cookie cutter. You know, they were trying to expand, and they didn't realize that, you know what's interesting? Not the news cycle. It's funny. I brought news to them, and then they became, I guess, corporately obsessed with it. I don't know why, but here we go. It's the end of an era. Cable news viewing falls versus quarter four. MSNBC dominates total day. Sure, congratulations, MSNBC, but your ratings are way, way down. Everybody's getting hit by the Trump slump. There was this grace period, I suppose, where everyone got to freak out for 4 years because Trump was president. Now they're all starting to fall apart. What's left today of companies like Vice? They're just activist corporate husks struggling to figure out how to make money. And it's almost like they forgot what people liked about it. It reminds me of there's like a lot of bands, you know. You ever listen to a band and they put out their first EP or their first album and you're like, this is really good. It's raw, it's rough, it's edgy. This dude's voice isn't perfect, but he's singing, you can feel it, and he's rocking that acoustic guitar. Then they get signed to a label, they get a budget, and they produce it the way they've always dreamed of. And then you're like, this is just more cookie cutter garbage. I'm going to avoid naming that band I'm speaking of in particular, but you can probably think of some. That's what happens with Vice. I don't want that to happen. I want it to be rough and edgy. So you know what I'm going to do? This is what we're doing over at timcast.com. Are you a member yet? You should become a member at timcast.com. I'm going to start putting together these adventure documentaries. And maybe there won't be a strong enough schedule because we're not going to force it. We're not going to go and do a boring, stodgy, I'm standing here at the border watching several. No, we're going to be like sending out some dude to go to, you know, bulletproof clothing and direct energy weapons and just have fun with it. Make it fun, silly, off the cuff, edgy, real. Just do it. Low budget. And that's the key. Always low budget. You start dumping all this money into it, getting this camera crew. Man, you know what really made me laugh? I was in Berkeley, and I guess, you know, Milo Yiannopoulos was there or something with a bunch of people, and they were doing their thing. And a Vice crew from Vice News showed up. And they had like 3 camera guys, a producer walking around, and a boom mic operator. I'm like, dude, when I went out into Ukraine, it was me and a guy with a camera, the same camera I'm actually using right now, which is kind of ridiculous, to be completely honest. Actually, that's not true. It is an upgraded version. But it was funny that like we would go out with just a single camera, 2 people, and it's like, go film that guy doing his thing. And it was fun and it was interesting. Then it became just like major corporate TV. And it's sad, isn't it? So what do you think? Do we want that kind of stuff back? If vlogs did really, really well, but vlogs were a little too silly and foofy. Nah, we want fun and exciting. We don't want crazy danger and shootouts and war stuff necessarily. I mean, it's always good to report the news, so I'll definitely be working in that direction. But we also want an interesting show where interesting people bring you interesting things. It's that simple. Wasn't there something just inherently interesting about seeing a regular dude find himself in a jungle with a dealer giving him scopolamine? And they didn't do anything with it, if you've seen this Vice doc. They just had it, and they were like, what do we do? Flush it down the toilet. And they did nothing with it, but it was just like crazy. Why can't we get that stuff back? Instead, everything's becoming more and more corporate cookie cutter. Yeah, guys, you forgot what made it interesting. Get woke, go broke. That's exactly it. It's becoming this stodgy, dressed up, moral authoritarian. It is rigid, it is boring, and it is failing. Why would somebody want to invest in a SPAC to acquire Vice Media? Is it the plan? I don't necessarily know what their plan is. They say to go public following a merger with 7GC & Co. Holdings, a special purpose acquisition company, according to a report. So what does that mean? They're going to merge with a SPAC and then take cash? Like as a way to effectively make Vice a public company? Does Vice need money that bad? Is this really the end? You know, at a certain point, I just have to wonder when you just decide to stop growing, because infinite media growth is just not going to happen forever. But you know what? Maybe this is kind of a send-off now. Seeing this story, I was like, oh, it's been 10 years since they were putting out those documentaries. 10 years ago. Maybe it's just gone now. And maybe that means that if you like something and it goes away because, you know, people age out, the people who ran it don't care anymore, and you got to make it yourself. So what are you going to do? What are we going to do? Media's collapsing. Cable ratings are down. Sports viewership is down. Everything's getting woke and going broke. Timcast is doing all right. And it's because of all of you guys who are watching. And so we're going to go nuts with it. We're going to do things way differently. I'm sick of the game. I'm sick of the machine. I'm sick of the establishment. I'm sick of people just not having guts. Isn't everything so boring? Where's any one of these rich people to do something disruptive, to make a statement? Well, we got Elon Musk. I mean, he made a flamethrower. That was pretty cool. He is building a starship and creating his own city. Those are all really cool things. What about just buying billboards that are nonsensical, just disrupt, to culture jam, to make a point about this moral authoritarianism, the rigid garbage? Vice used to be the edgy guys going around saying, F you, I'll do what I want. And then they became the machine. That's sad. The machine ate him alive. It's possible that happens to us in the long run, but, and I'll only be alive for so long. Reminds me of Wendy's. I remember people used to tell me this, that Wendy's had a salad bar. I vaguely remember this. Maybe it's not true. I don't know. And then Dave Thomas, the founder, died. And then now we're going to make it like McDonald's. That's how it goes, right? You either die the hero or live long enough to see yourself become the villain. Maybe it'll happen to us. But I'll tell you what I'm planning on doing. We got timcast.com rolling out. We got a major update coming hopefully next week. It's taking longer than we thought. I said last week, maybe this week. It's taking longer. You know why? Because we have to make sure that everyone, all the members are protected and we're getting the system right. So, better safe than sorry. And for now, timcast.com functions. But I'm doing it now. I am going to start taking pitches for mini docs. We're going to start funding this stuff. It's going to be epic. And we're going to have them up and it's going to be members only. It's going to be a service where you sign up, become a member, and you'll get access to this big library of content, same as you would with any other major service. It's going to be huge because I'm going to bring back what Vice had and what they lost. And I'm going to do my best. I'm far from perfect, but that's my mission. I'm going to make it happen. It's sad to see Vice go. I don't know if they deserve a Viking funeral at this point. I will not let what I'm going to be built, what I'm doing, become a skin suit to be worn by cultists, corporatists, weirdos. I'll leave it there. Next segment's coming up at 4 p.m. over at youtube.com/Timcast, different channel, and I'll see you all then.